If you are someone who wants to do a startup or already has one, this episode is for you. This conversation is a very natural and a very honest one with Rehan, who is the CEO of Bottle, founder of 4 Daily Wages, and has also just started a t-shirt brand called Purple Peanut. I'll be attaching all the links of their social media in the description box. Please check it out. For daily updates, please follow me on my Instagram @Manik Kamra Podcast. You can also write to me on info@manikkamra.com. Thank you. Rehan, I also want to ask, is that the only purpose of starting Purple Peanut, just to fund your startup, or is there any other reason behind that?
There is no other reason behind that as such.
Right.
I'll tell you where the idea or where we got encouraged to start a t-shirt company came from.
Okay.
So, my sister is into selling clothes. Like she runs her own clothing line. It's an Indo-Western line called Curious
Okay.
by Rehan Gupta.
Okay.
And at the turn of 2021, I started helping her with her marketing.
Right.
And it just took off, and things started selling easier than I had expected them to.
Mm-hmm.
So I took encouragement from that, and I felt that okay, if we've got some form of proficiency in terms of putting ads and writing copy and stuff like that, if that is something that is coming to us naturally, and if we can do that well,
Okay.
then it's best that we sort of start our own sort of t-shirt company of sorts to get some income running, so that we
Right.
can
Like the cash
raise
flow, right?
funds for Bottle. Yeah. So, that was very encouraging for me to sort of observe when I was running ads for my sister. And then from there, of course, the idea was just to raise money for Bottle, but inspiration came or encouragement sort of came from there.
Do you have a separate team that also handles Purple, or
No, no,
is
it's
it the
just
same team?
the co-founders on Purple Peanut. It's just the co-founders who are working.
Hmm. Who's your co-founder?
So I have three others,
Okay.
and one's Jasil, of course. I'm sure
Okay.
you know Jasil. He was
Yes, yes, I
LCP
do. I do.
of Isaac in Manipal after me.
Right.
So he's managing design both
Okay.
at Bottle as well as for Purple Peanut. And
Okay.
we have Zed. Zed was also on my EB in ISEC,
Okay.
and he's head of product. So he's on the
Okay.
product management, and he also manages the engineering team.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have Nevidya,
Okay.
who's more on the side of sales, legal, and finance. Like he oversees those things. And
Right. And
then
how is
there's me.
the okay? How is the decision making with all these co-founders?
So we've been friends since
Okay.
college. Um, so in terms of that, I think we get along really well, and we're sort of aligned in a lot of places. But we, allow people within their functions to take their own calls about whatever they want to do. And
Hmm.
if people from their functions themselves, they feel like they want to have a discussion with everybody,
Okay.
then we all get on a call, and then we just brainstorm, and then again allow that person from whatever perspective we've added to the discussion to take a call for their function. But if it's something that is more, sort of something that kind of affects the entire team or the entire
Hmm.
startup, or if there is a strategic change, then of
Right.
course, to a large extent, the decision making is influenced by me, I would say. But
Okay.
again, it's of course discussed with the other three before we take a final call, or we decide to make any sort of change in direction.
Okay. But like you have a veto power or something. I'm sorry if it's rude.
No,
I
no,
just
there's
want to
no
know
such.
how is that dynamic.
No, there's no such veto power at all.
Right.
We all have. I just say that I would pursue something more passionately compared to the others if it was something that was
Hmm.
affecting the entire startup. But I like I said, since all of us get along, there's never been a situation where we've come to a major disagreement or
Okay.
anything of that sort. So touch wood, fortunately for us, that's not happened ever. I mean, we've had passionate discussions, I would say, here and there,
Okay.
especially when you're discussing features and feature ideas.
Hmm. Yeah.
And when there are multiple interesting ideas that are tabled, of course, people they tend to get a little passionate about why their idea is better, but it's never really let's say extended beyond the call that we are having to make a decision. So the decision is made on the call, and everyone has always been okay with it. I mean, I think that's a great advantage that you have when you work with people that you know,
Okay.
because they understand you, and since everyone's like sort of aligned to the vision, especially, then it
Hmm.
becomes a little difficult. I mean, a little easier to get everyone on the same page about things.
Hmm. There's something I really value, and I like something that I value is conflict, or even arguments, because I believe when you argue, when a team argues in a healthy manner, there are a lot of ideas that actually come out of it. And sometimes, this is something I've seen personally, it also eventually improves your dynamic within the team. So is this something that you value, or is this something that you consciously put effort in to create such kind of conversations where people of different ideas discuss and see how they eventually come to a decision or something?
Right. I mean, uh, I wouldn't necessarily call it conflict as such, but I am of the same school of thought. I feel that discussion and deliberation on anything kind of brings out a refined solution to
Right,
the
right.
problem that you're trying to solve, because there'll be multiple sort of ideas that will be tabled first of all, and then through discussion you will firstly pick the right idea that you want to work on, and then from there also further deliberation will allow you to refine that. So I feel that that's something that's super important, and something that we've tried to inculcate not just in the founding team, but something that we want to do for our entire sort of entire team as a whole. Like, we want to create complete transparency and have a very flat hierarchy to
Right.
involve everyone in all sorts of discussions that we can, uh, especially on the product side of things, because like you said, I mean, diversity of opinion and in people sort of brings out better innovation. That's what
Right.
I strongly believe in, and which is why bringing all these people who are in different functions and come from different places. We're a completely remote team as well, so come from different places. I feel like they have a different perspective to add everybody, and then through that, it's essentially like we want to harness everybody's collective wisdom before we decide on what to do,
Absolutely.
rather than telling them what to do. So even when it comes to customer interviews and stuff like that, where we essentially try to gauge the needs of our potential customer, we involve our developers and our designers as well in those calls, so that they can firsthand understand from the customer itself what are the challenges that they're facing, so that
Hmm.
when we have a brainstorm about how we can find a solution or a new feature to solve their problem, they are also sort of involved completely, and they understand where our school of thought is coming from and where the customer is coming from, so to sort of help them also develop that empathy with the customer.
Right. Rehan, what's the problem that Bottle is not facing but solving right now?
I feel that we're trying to sort of empower managers who are both responsible for work management and people management.
Okay.
To a large extent, I feel that these are seen as different buckets and are managed by a lot of times managed by different people in companies. But I feel the future is where one manager will be responsible for making sure that a team is collaborating and is being engaged,
Okay.
to make sure that the tasks and the work is being done. At the same time, also make sure that these people are motivated, to make sure that the sentiment is good of the team. They feel appreciated and they have the right kind of feedback for the work that they're doing. So I
Okay.
feel, we are bringing all these three under the same tool,
Hmm.
allowing, let's say, one manager or an entrepreneur or anyone who has the liberty to do both these roles of work management as well as people management, one solution to figure these things out. Because at this moment, people are using one tool for communication. They're using a different tool to manage their tasks. They're using a different tool to manage performance and sentiment of their team, which essentially leads to one or the other being ignored somewhere or the other, and kind of does not bring that sort of coherence that is required, because I feel like all these three are important aspects of team leadership as well as management. So the idea is to bring all of them together to create like a very coherent experience for an entire team. So I think that's what we are solving for and working towards.
Right, absolutely, absolutely, Rehan. And thank you so much for answering. Rehan, I want to ask, how did the idea of bottle start? And how did you make sure that this is the problem that really exists? Because I've seen a lot of people, like if I want to start a startup, there may be a situation where I think that this is a problem, maybe a problem to me, but may not cater to the mass that for which I am planning to start a startup, right? So you get my question. So how did you make sure
Yeah.
that whatever problem you're trying to solve through bottle, how did you make sure that that problem is really a problem, and whatever you are offering that will for sure solve that problem?
Right. I mean, honestly, like um, we started in a very naive position. I'd say that when we started, we did not know enough. But I feel that to a certain extent, that also uh, helps you sort of take that leap of faith, because when you know a lot, you tend to over rationalize and you end up when you know the risks that are out there, you tend to be a little more conservative with actually
Yes,
going for
yeah,
things,
that's
right?
how evolution works.
So I
We
feel
tend to
that that was
think
our case
negative.
as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
everyone's case. When you
Uh,
start thinking about it, you obviously start seeing the all the cons of doing anything, and then okay, okay, let's not do this.
Correct. So I think when we started, we were a little naive and we could not understand, the cons or the negative side of things, which kind of worked in our favor and allowed us to take that leap of faith and start working towards something. And then from there, of course, the idea evolved. We were thinking of something else altogether when we started. I mean, on the same lines, trying to solve
Okay,
the same problem, but we were approaching it from a very different angle. But what, of course, like helped us and what is something that everyone should do as well is, I mean, people hesitate to share their idea with others. They have this thought that it might get stolen. But
oh yes,
what is really important for people to do is to discuss their idea with as many people as they can, especially people that they feel fall under their target audience.
okay,
Because before you start working on your idea, I think it's super important for you to get it validated, because essentially what otherwise happens is that if you start working on something, you build something out, and you haven't spoken to anyone about it, you've not really validated whether the assumptions that you have or the hypotheses that you have about the problems that your target audience is facing. If that's not validated and you build something out and then you put it out there,
mm-hmm.
it might get rejected. And then in that scenario, what happens is that you've put in a lot of resources, you've put in a lot of time to build something
Right,
that nobody really wants, or to solve a problem that no one is, uh, maybe the problem exists, but they're not too bothered by it. So I feel, once we started off, which we shouldn't have probably, like we started off with, we went all guns blazing and we sort of started the development process. But
okay,
what we realized that, through somewhere down the line, we realized that it was super important to talk to people and to put our idea out there with them and to discuss it with them and basically build the idea further or evolve the idea with the people who it's meant for. And that kind of helped us evolve the idea in itself, and it turned into what it is today. But I'd
okay,
like to believe that we're still in the discovery process. We have not nailed the solution yet. I feel that that will only come once we start testing. We
okay,
actually give it to the end users and get their feedback from there as well, and there'll be a lot of changing that will happen from there as well. But we've taken a lean approach to make sure that we're not, wasting a lot of resources, and we're not wasting a lot of time, and which is why we've still sort of been part time in terms of a lot of, like, everyone in our team is not full time, so we've not
oh
completely
okay.
committed to this until we're sure that we found the right solution. So it's something that we're kind of progressing towards every day. That's what the endeavor is at this moment.
Rehan, a lot of questions do come to my mind when you answered this. The first question is, so you told that when you started you were very naive, right? And then there were a lot of things that you discovered in the process, and then you have come a long way. So for a person who just has to start a startup, do you think that person should go through the whole process, like from, let's say if you were at zero, do you think a person should start from zero, or so the things that you have discovered, should that person start from the part where they already know, okay, this did not work for Rehan, probably will not work for me, So I'll start from where Rehan is right now. What do you think? Like, do you think a person should trust the process and start from the beginning? Is it different for everyone, or should they, learn from other founders, co-founders, about what did not work for them, and then start from wherever they thought, okay, this is the direction that I want to go.
I mean, in an ideal scenario, of course, you don't want anyone to start from scratch and
Hmm.
make mistakes. And ideally, like, probably take off right from the word go. That'd be ideal. That'd be really nice.
Right.
And it does happen, every once in a while with some great idea which takes off from, what it was in its ideation phase, and then it becomes something big right from there. But more
Okay.
often than not, I think the ideas change, they evolve. I mean, even if you take an example of a company like Slack, who is in the same sort of industry as we are. They started. I mean, as a founding team, they set out to build a game, and while they were trying to figure out, what game to build, they failed, and they were not able to come out with something convincing. But they'll
Right.
build this internal communication channel for themselves,
Okay.
which ended up becoming Slack, right?
Yes.
So I feel that I mean, there is no right starting point, because I mean, you don't know the challenges that you're going to face. It's kind of like how we used to say in ISEC as well, right? I mean, every team is going to face different challenges. Every year is
Absolutely.
going to be different. It's the same here as well. I mean, you can of course learn from different people's experiences, but a large part of problem solving is that the problem is different. The solution is of course going to be different. So the path to that solution is also going to be different.
Hmm.
And I mean, so you kind of have to trust the process. And in general, personal development also. I mean, there's only so much theoretical knowledge that you can take, but a large part of problem solving is about softer aspect of things which you learn with experience. You need to be a great listener. You need to be able to sort of detach your biases when you're trying to understand other people's problems and things like that. These are not things that I mean, these, of course, you can read about it and you can start
Okay.
consciously working towards it. But it's something that kind of, comes only with experience, only with you giving yourself time, and doing it constantly. So I feel that while it would be great for everyone to have all the knowledge that is out there before they begin, but everyone will go through their own process. You have to trust it at the end of the day. Like, it will be different, and it will be unique to a large extent.
Something that you said, Rehan, about acknowledging your biases and identifying them. Did you, when you started, did you know, or did you figure out that I have a few biases, and I should make sure that I don't involve them into my decision making, or me being a leader? So did you first identify them, and second, did you make sure that you also don't put all these biases into the product or into the features, or in the way you lead a team, or in the way you hire people, or in the way you get your co-founders? So how did that work for you?
Right. I feel like one major sort of thing that I started recognizing about myself, again through when we were doing a lot of customer interviews, which is talking to potential customers. I kind of
Okay.
realized that I was a little defensive about the idea, and at the
Oh,
same time, a
was
lot of
this
times
your, like,
in the
your idea, or was it like a cumulative idea? How was it?
it was a collective brainstorm, I would say. I mean, it's a long story in itself,
Okay.
but it was not my idea personally.
But you were
But in
emotionally
general, I
invested
mean,
in it.
no, no, no. I wouldn't say that it was emotional investment, because
Okay.
I mean, usually, very honestly, like, people are nice in customer
Right.
interviews, which is not a
Right.
good thing. Like, I would rather
Yes.
want them to be very brutal and honest,
Yeah,
because
honest
that's what would
feedback.
help us,
Absolutely.
to take something back and work on it. But in general, what I would see is that in these customer interviews where I should be actively listening, to a certain extent, I would still be wearing a salesman's hat, where I
Oh,
would feel like, it's my responsibility to make sure that by the end of this call, because I may not be interacting with these people again, they have a favorable opinion of, what we're trying to build, so
yes.
that they may use it in the future. And
Okay.
in that process, I feel that, sometimes I may be putting some thoughts in their head or trying to get answers out of them, which
Hmm.
would validate my own assumptions and
Yes.
hypothesis of the product, not just
You
mine
wanted it to
personally, but
work.
our teams. And I feel that that's not something that someone should do.
Yes.
And ideally, like, you should just throw questions at them and absolutely leave them to answer it themselves. and then from there just quietly, like, take notes of whatever they're saying, and then post the interview or post the call, understand what you can take back from the call and try to implement that. So I think that was, I was already aware that I'm not supposed to do this, but for me to consciously bring that into control, I had to do these interviews a bunch of times to realize that I was doing something wrong. And of course,
Okay.
like, I had, a co-founder or a fellow teammate on
Mm-hmm.
every call with me, with whom I would sort of, understand how it went and how things were going and how, what we could do differently and things like that. So that kind of helps you sort of learn and grow when it comes to these things. But I feel, yeah, I mean, active listening and keeping your biases away is super important. I mean, great observation skills as well is
Okay.
underrated skills for any startup founder,
Is
especially
the
when you are
observation skills.
building your startup. Yeah.
Hmm. I believe, a better skill for this would be being very mindful of everything. If you're talking to your customers, then make sure you're mindful of the conversation, you're mindful of what they're saying, and then, uh, like random question, do you document your journey, your startup journey? Any
Not
means?
really. I mean, no. I honestly don't. I don't maintain a journal.
Okay.
But I do want to. I mean, we've been considering the whole concept of building in public, where
Okay.
we've been thinking about consistently writing on social media about things that we're trying and things that we're doing,
Hmm.
um, and sort of trying to put our experiences into blogs as well, so that they can be helpful for people. At the same time, we feel that entrepreneurs and people and managers are our target audience.
Okay.
So if they sort of become subscribers or readers of the content that we're putting out there,
Mm-hmm.
that will be beneficial in both senses, for them on a personal level because they'll find
Right.
something useful, and for us as well because we'll be interacting with people that we essentially want to sell our product to eventually. So that's something that we've been considering, but in general, not really. Like, I honestly, it is sort of documented in the sense that the work that we do, we've been managing our tasks virtually. So
Okay.
everything that we've put down and how we are going about it is by default documented because of that. But if you say if I'm documenting my emotional journey
Mm-hmm.
of things that I am going through and how I'm feeling about certain things, then not so much. I haven't consciously done that.
Right. Rehan, so when you were telling me the story of Slack, of how they were developing a game and then Slack happened and then they just took off. What if the purple peanut takes off? What would you leave bottle and pursue purple peanut? Or like just a hypothetical question, but what would your thoughts be and what do you think you as a person would do?
Very honestly, like I I I feel like purple peanut is an idea that has a ceiling,
Okay.
and it's a ceiling that will catch up very soon rather than later. I mean,
Hmm.
it's a red ocean. It's a huge competition when it comes to fashion apparel, and there's only so much that you can do after a point.
True.
Our
True.
ambition with bottle, of course, is much bigger.
Like very
And honestly,
scalable.
if bottle does not kick off, then I mean, I may continue purple peanut, because if it's doing well, then why not? If it's a good source of income, might sort of delegate it to somebody else to help me with it. But then I would probably want to focus more on taking up a job, building my network further, or even pursuing masters and stuff like that, rather than
Okay.
building purple peanut as the primary, because that's not something that I feel very passionate about. I'll be very honest. I mean, it's
Okay.
not my passion to sell clothes. So it's not something that I feel like I would be happy doing for the rest of my life. So I think that's where we are with it.
Right, Rehan. So I was reading a book by like there's a book like it's an alumnac of Naval Ravikant, and he was talking about budgets and how budgets kind of restrict us in the way like it limits us. We live in scarcity when we create a budget, and both of us come from a well, like we kind of have a finance background in ISEC. So I want to ask, what's your thought, and do you like have a proper documented budget in your startup, or how does it work, like the financial aspect of the organization?
Right. I mean, to be very honest, at this moment, we don't have a formal budget because we've not been able to estimate our costs.
Okay.
So we can only get to our costs once we've launched the product, and I mean, a lot of our costs are variables in terms of how users use the product. So
Oh,
how much
yes.
server load is coming, how many API calls are being made, etc. And that will help us sort of understand what our costs are going to be for us to be able to, then based on how we want to scale, build a budget for it. We've been working with about 8 odd interns for whom we've been giving them a small sort of stipend, and that doesn't require too much budgeting at this moment.
Okay.
But yeah, definitely. I mean, we are at that cusp where we're thinking about putting some money in,
Okay.
personal money, and once we get to that stage, is where I feel like we will have a very, let's say, strong budget as to what we want to do with it. But I mean, honestly, I feel that, and I think one of our friends, Pratibha, was recently talking
Okay.
about this, in terms of creativity, where she said that there's a myth about creativity that restraints limit creativity, or constraints sort of limit creativity. But in actuality, it helps you overcome sort of, a sort of like a blank paper syndrome of sorts. I mean, restraints
Hmm.
and constraints, they kind of they challenge you and they inspire you to do something with the limited availability of resources,
Right.
or of ideas. So I feel that it's a good challenge that kind of, because of which a lot of new innovations that nobody would have otherwise thought of come out. Because when you have a lot of money and you don't have any constraints, you tend to do the obvious.
Okay.
You will go for whatever is available out there because you don't have any constraints, and you'll take up things from other people's experiences because those work. But when you
Yes.
have constraints, you tend to think out of the box. You try to find a way around those constraints, which end up creating something new. They end up creating something that is more innovative, or a new sort of solution to the same problem. So I feel that they kind of uh, accelerate the creativity process to a large extent.
Your answer. So I was recording I was shooting a podcast last weekend in Dehradun, and then there's something. Her name is Sarika Panchi. She's the CEO of a company called Word of Mouth Media. It's a totally bootstrapped organization, and she had a very good corporate job, very high up in the ladder, and then she quit that. She switched to this job, this being the CEO and the co-founder of the company. And then I was talking to her about abundance, but then also there's a school of thought of less is more. So when you were your answer actually reminds me how less can be more, because yes, obviously the blank paper syndrome and what Pratibha said, that all these constraints, they actually challenge us, and yes, we try to find a way around. And actually, like, if we are looking for something and if we don't have the typical resources of for them, then we obviously try to find another solution or try to do something in some other way. And what we Indians call as jugaad, right? But I think
Yeah,
jugaad is also, you thinking like your creativity actually, boiling down to a like something, some solution, right?
correct.
So but something that I also want to talk about are the bootstrapped startups. What are the challenges that you face because you are a bootstrap, or is there any challenge that you face because you're a bootstrapped startup? I'm assuming
I
you're a
feel,
bootstrapped startup.
yeah, we are a bootstrap startup, and honestly, the challenge at this stage, I wouldn't be able to point my finger at it. I mean, of course, when you have abundance of resource, you tend to be faster in terms of your solution finding process, because you can throw your money around and you can experiment faster. You can get uh, you know greater talent on board, and you can basically be faster and fail faster, even if you
Okay.
do not succeed faster, and then move
Hmm.
on to something else.
You
When
can
you're
fall and
bootstrapping,
get up quicker.
correct, and you have greater opportunity to fall as well when
Okay.
when when you have
As in you fall
resources.
on a bigger
Uh,
platform.
yeah, and I don't know if you fall on a bigger platform, but you have, let's say, the capacity to fall and get up again,
Right.
and fail multiple times.
Hmm.
With bootstrap startups, the challenge, of course, is that you are a little more careful in terms of where you're putting your resources, because you don't have the abundance of resources. So
Right.
you're a little more. skeptical about before investing in something, before trying something, absolutely new, and things like that, which can be a sort of a hindrance, because the startup sphere is such where uh, speed is sometimes very important. So
Okay.
I think that's the challenge that kind of comes with bootstrap startups, where you don't have the freedom to move really fast. And of course, like, you can't pay your people really well. But I think that on the contrary, like, because of that, you end up finding people who genuinely buy into the idea, who buy into
Yes.
the vision, and are connected to the purpose of what you're trying to do. Because when you have a lot of money to throw around, people may join for those reasons.
Right.
But when you are bootstrapped, I think being bootstrapped is sort of like, I consider it an absolute advantage, especially in your discovery phase.
Okay.
When you are not just discovering your product and validating your idea, but also building your team. I feel in this phase is when you come across the right people who are, like I said, joining for the right reason, and then with them, once you continue growing, once you create a solid foundation for yourself, I think once you're ready to grow, like when you figured and you probably found your wings, but now you want to take flight, is when you should probably go for venture capital and then just go all guns blazing out there. But until then, I feel like being bootstrapped allows you to focus more on the customer side, be more listen better, because you want to make sure that everything that you're building is correct from the like from inception itself. So you listen better, you want to build value for the customer, because you can't throw a lot of money at your customer to acquire
Yes.
them and things like that.
True.
So you genuinely have to build something that is valuable for them to use it. So I think being bootstrap kind of creates these circumstances for you to focus on those things better, where you tend to put the customer first and build something that they will genuinely and definitely use, because you don't have any other option. Like, you cannot acquire them by any other means.
So, first of all, Rehan, thank you so much for answering that. I really like your idea. And I'll refer back to again the podcast that I shot last weekend. So one thing that I was speaking to Sarika ma'am was about how the game of bootstrapped startup is about delayed gratification, right? So because she was in a corporate job, and the corporate job gives you a lot of gratification, and most importantly it gives you a monthly paycheck, right? And Rehan, then you right now you're running a startup, you are into the game of delayed gratification. How do you make sure that you're not tempted to switch to like an immediate gratification job, like a probably like a freelance or a proper payroll job? And how do you make sure that even there may not be a lot of revenue coming in, like not a lot of immediate gratification from whatever, like the number of customers or whatever you think, whatever you aspire to do, but still you think, okay, like how do you motivate first yourself, and then how does your team motivate themselves, or how do you motivate your team in these scenarios, in these situations?
Very honestly, like, I won't say that I'm completely immune to these things, because I feel that somewhere down the line I do think about it, where I look at my peers doing exceptionally well,
Okay.
taking up new jobs, and doing really well, working at startups, or not their own necessarily, but working at startups, or going abroad and starting jobs there, and and I feel capable enough to do the same and earn some money. So there is that. So, like, I think in the early part of my journey, that was a thought that used to sort of bother me. But I feel that over time, after talking to a lot of people, um, I feel that they're sort of, the excitement that I see in people's eyes as well for our idea and for our product kind of encourages me and makes me feel like we're headed in the right direction, and it'll all be worth it eventually. But on a personal level, I mean, you are aware, of course, that so far I've never really had that proper paycheck job,
Yes.
right? I mean, I was
Hmm.
working for ISEC, and we were primarily volunteers there,
Right.
more or less. So as a human being, I mean, I personally, at least, have always been the kinds who are more attracted towards helping people and solving problems. Then the sort of the, I don't know, the external or extrinsic motivation of money and anything else that comes along, which is more of an external factor. So I am more motivated intrinsically towards problem solving, and and working with people. And I feel that in itself is my constant gratification. The fact that I get to work with my people, work on my idea. I wake up extremely happy, uh, and kind of like fulfilled with energy to go about my day. I feel that is sort of like instant gratification that comes along. Maybe it's just not extrinsic; it's more intrinsic at this moment. Like it's coming from within, which is why I feel like I'm not too bothered. But I
Hmm.
mean, reality is that you do need money, and I think that's where Purple Peanut sort of now fills in like a certain gap. But
Right.
otherwise, I feel that it's like, I mean, gratification does not necessarily only come from money or external sources, right?
Absolutely.
There's a lot of like
But
there's
it
a lot
do
of
obviously comes
internal
from
gratification.
numbers, various kinds
Yeah.
of numbers. But Rehan, really, like, I really appreciate your answer, very honest. And I think it's a great situation to be in when, everything that other people may seek outside, you already have that inside you, the kind of motivation, the inspiration that you need. And I think that's a great way to navigate through your life. And I'm sure this is who you are as a person of the startup as well. Like, this is, I'm sure this is how you navigate your through your personal life as well. And again, this is a great situation to be in. And this something that from your answer really resonated with me about how you focus at solving problems, and how you also have a social inclination. And one of the things that you started for daily wages is something that inspired me a lot, like a lot. And I think I've spoken this about this to a lot of people, and this is also one of the reasons you were in my list of, so this the English podcast, there are supposed to be 20 guests, right? And the 20 guests
Yeah.
that I get on the podcast, it's also my bet for, like, against the world, that these are the 20 people who will make big in their life. I'm also writing a book out of it, like creating 20 chapters out of the 20 podcast. And again, because you are on this podcast, my bet is for you, like, all of my stakes are in for you against everyone. Not everyone, but whoever does not support you, that you are someone who will make really really big in their life. And again, if you can talk a bit about For Daily Wages and what is the purpose of that organization, and what is it up to now?
I mean, what you said, of course, I mean, it means a lot, and it's again, like I said, like another source of validation, a motivating sort of, where when you get appreciated like that, or if someone motivates you like that, it's gratification right there.
Yes, not that you need
And I
any.
feel that.
You made it very clear you don't need any, but I still wanted to say that.
And at the same time, I mean, what I wanted to add to the last answer before we get to for daily wages is, I mean, not that I am some sort of saintly figure. You also require supportive parents for something like this. And I feel that they've also added a lot of value in that sense, where they've given me the freedom to pursue my passion, and told me not to worry about anything else. And I think that gives me that sort of confidence to then go about things at my own pace, and sort of go about trying to do what we're trying to do here. But
Amazing. It's a
talking,
privilege. Same
yes,
goes for me. I tell this to a lot of people that I am very privileged because I can follow my passion, first thing. And second, all of this is because my parents, they obviously told me that, you don't need to worry about anything. You just follow your passion, do whatever you want to. It is a huge privilege, Rehan, to not not think about how are you going to get food on your plate, or if you're responsible to put food on someone else's plate. A huge privilege.
absolutely. And I feel that that is exactly where the idea for daily wages stems from. Especially like when the lockdown was just announced,
Hmm.
uh, you know, you could literally see like the divide in society, difference across the societal spectrum about how people were dealing with the lockdown in itself.
Right.
On one end of the spectrum, people like us, uh, you know, uh, people who I believe are fairly privileged in life, uh, for them it was sort of like a welcome break.
Yeah,
Uh,
drinking
it was
dalgona
it was
coffee.
yeah, it was like a moment where life was paused, and people, apart from just pursuing these hobbies and things like that, they got a genuine opportunity to rethink their lives, to rethink the
True.
things that they want to do, whether it was to think about a change in job, or if they were, still in college, then genuinely think if they want to pursue what they're pursuing, to upskill themselves for a future job, or just pursue different hobbies. Like people started cooking, people were making coffee, and
Yes.
I mean, they were pursuing different things and keeping themselves occupied, and it was really good to see. That side of things was really good to see. But at the same time, you were hearing so much about the migrant crisis, where people were doing the unimaginable. They were trying to walk thousands of kilometers back to their hometowns.
Yes.
Daily wagers had lost their source of sustenance, where there was no income coming in. So for them, because they anyway, under normal circumstances as well, work from meal to meal, right? I
True.
mean, their daily income essentially goes into putting food on their family's table.
True.
It's not like they're left with a lot to save for, certain for these things
Yes. Zero
that
zero
eventually.
savings.
So I feel that that's where the idea kind of stemmed from, where the idea was to, at least through the lockdown period, help these people with their immediate sustenance, to put some food on their tables. But the overall vision, of course, was that we wanted to, I mean, as a bigger picture, not just, be something that is relevant during the pandemic, but something that, helps these people break this cycle of working from meal to meal, and so that where we can play that role of putting food on their table, and they can start focusing on, building a brighter future for their families, whether that is by investing in, their children's education, or investing in better healthcare, because a lot of times, when the earning member of the family either becomes, ends up, I mean, sometimes they, God forbid, end up losing their lives, or they end up getting handicapped in some way or the other. They're not able to afford healthcare, and these are real challenges that these people face because they don't have access to clean water. There are, especially in India, there are tons of problems that you can talk about that these people face because of a lack of source of income. So I felt like, somewhere, by at least providing them the basic, that is food, we could, help them sort of from there, um, focus on building a better future for themselves and their families. And I mean, at some point we did think of experimenting with other things as well, where we didn't want to just limit ourselves to food. We thought of, helping them get insurance and things like that. But I
Mhm.
feel that uh, it's something that we probably need to stabilize when it comes to food itself, and then probably
Right.
expand to those things. But
Right.
yeah, I think that's what the thought process was behind for daily wages.
Absolutely amazing initiative, Rehan. I really appreciate your idea, and everyone who made sure that it is, it conceptualizes, and it turned into a reality. And I'm very happy to, to be associated with a person like you. Rehan, last part of the podcast, I want to talk to
No,
you a
I,
bit
I
about.
actually, before we get to that, I mean, I want to really appreciate you as well, because you were one of our donors, especially in our early
That's
days,
right. That's right.
and your donation, of course, helped a family in ways that we cannot think of, because like we were discussing earlier, we are sort of privileged. But for you to, and the beauty of our daily wages is that you're not expecting this. It's not that the money comes into your account and then it's like a stranger knocks at your door with a package of food.
Hmm.
It's just a beautiful
Right.
feeling, and you were one of those people who enabled that. So I think, and you're doing so great with these things. I think you deserve as much appreciation as anybody else for for daily wages and for being a participant in our sort of organization.
Rehan, I think lockdown was also for me. It was a space where I could first acknowledge my privileges, and then second, obviously, started taking more responsibility towards the community. And the reason why I wanted to start this podcast was the kind of access that I have to the kind of access to people, to places, the kind of access to network I already have or I can have, to the access to people like you. I think not a lot of people can do that. I come from a very small town of Punjab. I was there for first 15 years of my life till my 10th standard, and then I was privileged enough. My parents, invested money and sent me to a bigger city. Then I've been in Chandigarh for 5 years, and I was in Nepal for almost a year, and then again I'm back to Chandigarh now. It's a huge privilege, and I believe every person should take their responsibility first, identify, and then take the responsibility towards their community. It's not a way of giving back. Giving back means that society has given me something, the society has given me a lot of things, but it's not something that I'm giving in return. It's my responsibility to do that. Since lockdown has been a catalyst for me to acknowledge all of these things and make sure that how can I serve the community, or I think serve is the not the right word, but how can I execute my responsibility towards the community. And I've been trying to do that uh, in any way possible. I've been volunteering with NGOs. I've been trying to financially help wherever I can, and then this podcast is also the product of that. So that has been happening, but enough about me. Rehan, there's something that I want to talk, is something that I think is not talked enough, is clear communication, and I believe your product also solves this problem of clear communication in the workspace, right? So I want to ask, what is at stake when a person in a company is not communicating clearly? What's at stake?
Everything, to be very honest. I mean, communication is part of literally everything that you do, right? I mean,
Right.
um, right from you building your idea to collaborating with your team, trying to get work done. Communication is the means of everything. It is,
Hmm.
I mean, I don't know how to put it in any other way. So I feel like poor communication leads to conflict. Poor communication leads to, wrong execution of things,
Absolutely.
and everything in that sense can be negatively detrimental to what you're trying to do. And I mean, it leads to misunderstandings. It's, I mean, I just feel like it's a fundamental thing that people should be able to do. uh,
True.
Communication is at the foundation of innovation as well. If someone who has a a great idea but is not able to communicate that effectively, that idea will never see the light of the day. So I feel, communication is at the bottom of everything that is happening in the world. Whether it is how nations are interacting with each other, or it's how people are interacting with each other. I feel that communication is tied to all of those things, and being effective in that, being clear with that, not just in terms of being clear of putting what you want to say out there, but
Hmm.
essentially making sure that the other person has understood it the way that you want or you meant it to be,
True.
is super
True.
important, which is where I feel that people don't put a lot of effort. People are sort of fixed on just putting out what they want to say, but they never really bother or put effort into trying to understand if the other person received it the way it was intended. And I
Right.
feel that there is some, that is what people need to start working towards. Where, because I mean, what people feel is that communication is down to clarity in language,
Okay.
which is not the case.
Right.
Communication is not down to simply clarity in language. If, let's say, you speak good English, that does not necessarily mean that you're communicating effectively,
Oh,
because
absolutely.
you don't know how the other person who you are speaking to is perceiving that or receiving that.
Hmm.
So you putting the effort to ensure that that is happening, and that you guys are on the same page, is when I feel, I mean, and in general, like, I mean, I was reading this somewhere that communication is not complete unless the other person has acknowledged and understood it the way that you intended it to.
True.
And I feel that that's where the problem kind of lies, where people just sort of put what they have to say out there without bothering whether the other person completely understood it or not, and they're more focused more on speaking than helping the other person understand.
Absolutely. The product aside, I think even in conversations, you need to be a very good. People focus a lot on the the speaking part, but I believe, and this is something I've learned from having conversations on the podcast, you need to be a very good listener. When someone is speaking to you, you're already revising what you will answer to that, It's a very bad state to be in, because this is something, because okay, Rehan, if you're speaking to me in person, I should be very mindful of first what you are speaking, second what's your body language, and what is something you want to communicate to me even through your body language, the non-verbal communication part of that, right? And I think people don't focus on that much. People focus only on, let's say, the speaking part of it or the conveying part of it, but they don't really put, think, okay, how would the other person perceive or receive the message that I've just sent. I think that's a huge
Correct.
problem the workspaces are facing. And I think, again, kudos to you. Your product, I'm sure, will solve this problem. Uh, and but or like the product aside, Rehan, if a person in, like, in if an individual needs to solve this problem, let's say without any product, what would those skills be? Or, because I believe first, obviously, a person has to be a good listener, but is there anything else, any other skill that a person should have to make sure that they communicate really well, even, even if no product is involved?
I think they should start a podcast.
Right.
No, very honestly, and you know how I would judge whether the the person or the two people on the podcast are communicating well enough is if the conversation is natural and it has a proper flow. Because, like you said, more often than not, if you're not listening, then
Okay.
you're focusing on what you're going to speak next. And in
Hmm.
that scenario, the conversation or the flow of the conversation is not natural.
True.
It's broken because you're essentially just focused on answering questions and focused on basically you already have a set thing in place and you're just following a script of sorts,
Yes.
which is kind of it will have its own breaks. You will observe that. But when you're listening actively, you're building onto what the other person is saying, and that creates a natural flow. So I think a good way for someone to observe, because I mean I said podcast, but a good way would be to sort of somehow try to get either a third person observer to observe how the conversations are going, or in general, I mean, if they are participants in something like this, they can hear it back and see how they were doing at it. But I mean, communication is again, it's a very soft skill. It's a very vague and abstract concept. There is
Mm-hmm.
no there's no to-do list that you can follow and check, or a checklist that you can follow, saying that that you have to check off, saying that if I do these things, I'm communicating effectively. It's a very subjective sort of a topic which changes with the situations that you're in. Requires a lot of emotional intelligence and empathy, and like you said, great listening skills. And I feel that it's only something that comes with time when you're consciously working towards it. So in the most cliched sense, I mean, it requires um, sort of like first an admission that you are not completely good at it.
True.
Like I said, I
Really
mean, just
important.
being clear in your language is not good communication. So if you see that you're constantly in conflict with people around you, you see that people are misunderstanding you or not understanding you, then what probably that kind of indicates as a potential inference is that you are not communicating effectively, and then that would require a conscious effort to start understanding that whether what exactly is at the bottom of that. Is it that you're not listening before you're speaking, or something else that's going wrong altogether? But I don't think there's a checklist that someone can follow. It's something that comes from conscious effort and practice. It's one of those things like it's just something that happens on its own, sort of, once you consciously start working towards it.
Right. Rehan, I think this is going to be the last question, but if there's another question that comes out of that, I'll ask that. But what is the most less spoken skill that a founder or a co-founder should have, or anyone working in a startup, for this question?
I'd say, I think you've put me in a spot.
I'll answer for
Uh,
myself, because okay, I'm not in properly in a startup setup, but if I were there, I think, and this is something our generation lacks a lot, it's patience. Being being into startup, you need a lot of patience. You need to stay at it. People cannot stay at it because the attention span has decreased, and there's a lot of like because obviously internet has made it easier for us to know more and more options, and then there's decision fatigue. You see other people doing well, and then you just are tempted to do something else, that to choose a path that will probably give you instant rewards. But I think if you are patient, if you are consistently staying at it, putting efforts, and I think that's a skill that is not spoken about a lot, but is really really important for a person to be in a startup setup.
I completely agree. I feel patience and consistency. I mean, they're kind of two things that definitely are super important. And in my head, what comes is probably like, an appetite for taking risks and failing.
Hmm.
I feel that kind of is super important as well, because sometimes it's not just that, you need patience for your idea to succeed.
Okay.
You also need to quickly fail and work on something else and move on. So you need to constantly have that sort of risk taking appetite and the ability to take a knock on your chin and get up again and start working on something new. And I feel that comes with your ability to take risk, because startups are essentially built on trial and error.
Right.
You cannot, I mean, it's not like, there's a list of billion-dollar ideas out there that you need to start
True.
working on, and then,
Yes.
it will slowly become what it is. You will have to keep trying, keep failing, and then try again and again. I feel that, that sort of appetite for risk, failure, and resilience, of course, that
Yeah,
a
yeah,
dash of
resilience is
resilience
important,
on
yes.
top, I feel is also super, super important.
Rehan, I should ask this. I know I said the last question, and this I don't know why this happens to me a lot. Like I say, okay, this is going to be last question, but then mostly the last answer of the guest tempts me a lot. I don't know why. Uh, but I want to ask Rehan. So you talked about failures, and everything is hidden trial. You get a knock on your chin, and then you start over. How has your opinion about, or how is your viewpoint of failures changed over the years? Because for me, I don't, right now I think I don't even call them failures, I just call them learnings. But then you don't get out of them, you don't get any, like it's just learnings for me. So has it changed for you, and how has it changed for you, if the answer is yes?
I mean, I feel like I see it the same way as
Okay.
you do. And I mean, I've been someone who's been very competitive all my life. So failing is not
Mm-hmm.
something that I personally enjoy, to be very honest. Even if I do see it as a learning, it's not a good feeling ever. Um, any conversation, any interaction that I go into, or any transaction that I'm part of, like, I don't mean just financial transaction, but anything that's happening, any negotiation,
Okay.
I have this sort of innate requirement within me to come out on top, right?
Like dominating
But
the conversation transaction.
but not dominating, I would say, but ensuring that it's favorable for me
Okay.
or for the purpose that I am serving, or the organization that I'm serving, whatever it is, right? And I feel that like, over time, I think with maturity, what has come is the perspective that when you do end up failing, then yeah, I do end up seeing it as a learning. But it's not something that I look forward to as such. It's not something that I want for myself. But it's something that I've learned to become okay with, to see the positive side of as well, which is in the form of learning. But what I feel is that failure sort of adds a new layer of motivation and sort of, to a certain extent, aggression and
Mm-hmm.
assertiveness in me to sort of go out there again and prove myself. It kind of, like, failure kind of puts me in particular into like a underdog sort of a situation, because now a lot of people, especially like your critics in life, they look at failure as an opportunity to tell you that this is something that we already warned you about. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, when that happens, it kind of creates this newfound, or it brings this newfound energy and motivation to come out again and get on top.
Yeah,
So I've
going
never seen
harder at it.
myself, yeah, I've never seen myself sulk after facing or after coming out, let's say, on the wrong side of things. I kind of have been able, fortunately, with God's grace, been able to like pick myself up again and go at it again, or go at something else again to build my myself or my confidence. And I feel like fortunately, like somewhere or the other, like these things have kind of worked out through college, and now, I mean, let's see how it goes with the startups. But I feel like, I always uh, find like some reserve energy to go at it again, or to find some sort of solution for the problems that we face.
That's a great approach to be, Rehan, and I know my bets are on the right people. And I know you're a full of you have always been full of energy. I've seen the kind of vibe, the kind of aura that you bring in when you speak, let's say in the plenary or anywhere you speak, you bring in a lot of energy. And again, my bets are on the right people, so I'm not afraid at all. I know you're going to make it big. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, Rehan. Thank you so much for your time. I wish you all the luck for bottle, for daily wages, and peanut, purple peanut.
Thanks a lot, Manik. It was an absolute pleasure, and it's always great to reconnect with someone that you've sort of lived similar experiences when we were
Yes,
working in ISEC, and reconnect, and to obviously, on the sidelines, observe each other, make or go on our own journeys. And
right.
it was a beautiful conversation. It felt very, very natural.
Yes,
Probably one of the best
me as
podcasts
well.
that I've been part of, and it was
I'm
super great.
glad that happens. Right, Rehan. Goodbye. Thank you.
All right, Manik. Bye bye.